Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to How Solemn as One by One, poem number 35 of the 43 of Drum Taps. So we're clearly coming to the end of Drum Taps, and I find this one of the most remarkable little gems in all of Leaves of Grass. I have said to you a number of times that it's fascinating the way, to me, that Whitman can speak so directly to me and to you, and this is why I've called this series of talks with Walt that very title, because there is such a kind of like direct type of connection. And when you stumble onto this for the first time, as I mentioned it when I was doing Brooklyn Ferry, it's kind of shocking, and we're going to see it in this poem here. Now, the assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side from the very beginning. I just mentioned Brooklyn Ferry, and we're going to come back to it here in a moment. I gave a set of introductory comments for Drum Taps, and we just worked with that amazing little poem, Reconciliation. Our Nortons will tell us about this poem that it was one of the sequel pieces of 1865-66 and has remained in Drum Taps in all editions. The title note, Washington City, 1865, was added in 1871 to give a clear immediacy to this poem. Let's just enjoy the poem and the way in which Whitman pulls off something that there are very few poets that I'm familiar with other than Emily Dickinson who has this ability of being so intimate. Take a look. How solemn, as one by one, as the ranks returning, worn and sweaty, as the men file by where I stand, as the faces, the masks appear, as I glance at the faces, studying the masks, as I glance upward out of this page, studying you, dear friend, whoever you are. How solemn the thought of my whispering soul to each in the ranks and to you. I see behind each mask that wonder, a kindred soul. Oh, the bullet could never kill what you really are, dear friend, nor the bayonet stab what you really are. The soul, yourself, I see, great as any, good as the best, waiting, secure, and content, which the bullet could never kill, nor the bayonet stab. Oh, friend. Now, we have said that we are concentrating on what we call in room 303 our big five. That is to say, what does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective group mind, and then finally the question of theodicy. Why is it that terrible things have to happen? And of course, as we have heard Whitman say it from that To Thee, O Cause poem at the very beginning of Leaves of Grass, my book and the war are one. And it's going to be here again that he will play that game brilliantly. He will play that game as he plays with each one of us as readers. It's quite a remarkable poem. I love the fact, as I have said this before to you, how Whitman still has this ability to kind of reach out from the page and ask for our hand, and in so doing, we're kind of blown away by the immediacy of a poem like this. Notice, he begins with the word solemn, which will take us back to Synod Herbage of Brest, and then he'll use the word as. 6 times we're going to get this word. How solemn as one by one. We're going to see this one by one other time in a poem later in Leaves of Grass, Death of General Grant. One by one, as the ranks returning. So at the beginning of Drum Taps, we will have ranks leaving and going off. And now we will have them returning. Notice, worn and sweaty. I mean, watch just how brilliant this is. In a very early poem, that is to say, first, O Songs for a Prelude. Do you remember that in a parenthetical, he says it this way, how good, he's talking about soldiers, how good they look as they tramp down to the river, sweaty with their guns on their shoulders. The brilliance of Drum Taps, in my estimation, is that Whitman covers all of the elements of the war. Beginning, of course, with the optimism as they were leaving the city. Now, of course, they're coming back to Washington City in 65. Notice now, they're worn and sweaty as the men file by where I stand. So you have Whitman watching as now they've left the city, now they're coming back, as the faces, and again, the faces have been so central to our reading of Leaves of Grass, but especially our reading of Drum Taps. The faces, the masks appear. And Of course, this idea of a mask is going to take us all the way back to the ancient Greek tradition of personae. We've given full lectures on this at learnstrong.net. And of course, the power of qualifying the way they look as having a mask. Of course, what are we saying? They're changed. The gentlemen and women who left are coming back, and they are not the same. And of course, we'll pick up with this with Crane's Red Badge of Courage. We've given full lectures on that elsewhere, but at learnstrong.net. But notice, it's the masks appear as I glance. By the way, the word masks will take us to Song of the Universal. You'll remember forth from their masks. As I glance at the faces, studying the masks, and of course this use of the word glance is powerful in Leaves of Grass. We've seen it so many times used, right? Glancing, looking, this look, and he's about to give us a glance or a look. As I glance, he repeats it, as I glance upward out of this page, notice it's studying you, and then it's dear friend, and then it's whoever you are. There is an immediacy that just blows me away to Leaves of Grass. It really does. I mean, there are few poets who have this ability to say, hey, come here for a sec. Let's talk about this or that. Let me show you, what I've got to show you. How, and now we're back to the word, solemn, the thought of my whispering soul, which takes us, of course, back to Song of Myself 48. I've said that the body is not more than the soul. I've said the soul is not more than the body. Nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. The whispering soul to each in the ranks, and then he comes back to you. In other words, here Whitman has this ability to kind of reach out and to take you by the hand and say, why don't you stand here with me and let's watch these soldiers returning from the war together. And we'll look at each other's face. It's quite a remarkable accomplishment. How solemn the thought of my whispering soul to each in the ranks and to you. And then he says it. I see. And notice how this I see construction, or I look, has been so popular in Leaves of Grass. I see behind each mask. And of course, this will take us to our study of T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Every day we prepare a face to meet the faces that we meet and all of that. I think T.S. Eliot was very influenced by a poem like this when he was working with Prufrock. I see behind each mask that wonder. It's amazing. And Whitman again, he will have what we have called an informed optimism. He's just kind of blown away. The wonder, a kindred soul. In other words, we're all kind of in this together. Think about the ontological power of this idea. And then he says, oh, and we've heard this oh a number of times in drum taps. Oh, the bullet could never kill what you really are, dear friend. Notice, now he's talking again directly to you. And what does he say ontologically? Well, yeah, you're a body, but you're also a soul. And souls can't die. That is to say, bullets cannot, in the end, kill you. And you could make the argument that his theodicy is a cultural argument as well. America can't be killed by bullets, right? Can't be killed by bullets. Nor, he says, the bayonet stab what you really are. Of course, we've had some pretty horrific scenes in drum taps, as we've pointed out. I mean, some really disturbing scenes. And yet, notice, all the things that weaponry and technology can do to the human body cannot touch the soul, he argues. And then he says it again. The soul, exclamation point. Yourself, I see. And here's the genius of what great artists all do. I mean, we think about all the great artists, and we're always going to reference the greats, Shakespeare and Milton, no question, have this ability to hold the glass up to see. But as well, I think the contemporary Emily Dickinson, there's a reason why Dickinson and Whitman are so often linked. And I think Dickinson had this same ability to speak directly. The soul, yourself I see, great as any, good as the best. Notice the empowering here that he is suggesting. Doesn't matter what happened in the war. You are good. You are great. Why? Because fundamentally you're not just a body, you're also a soul, which is quite a remarkable theme. Waiting the soul, secure and content. It's an amazing recognition, because these soldiers are coming back, many of them obviously struggling with post-traumatic stress. That is to say, they have their mask on. And he says, I can see behind the mask, and in the end, you will be secure, you will be content. But is he speaking to the soldiers, or is he speaking to you and me as readers of the poem? He's looking at us through the powerful mirror that is Leaves of Grass. It's quite remarkable. waiting secure and content, which the bullet could never kill, nor the bayonet stab, and then for the third time, oh, friend. Now, what are we going to do with a poem like this? I mean, I've taught this poem to some readers who say this is their favorite poem in all of the drum taps. It's because of that immediacy, and I find it quite a remarkable thing. I mean, at 2A, obviously, for messages, the soul can't be stopped. That is to say, America can't be stopped. It cannot be conquered. And then at 2B, I mean, the personal address here is truly remarkable. Notice as well, the word choice, remember in Song of Myself 48, to glance with an eye ashore, being in its pod confounds the learning of all time. I think that Song of Myself 48 stands behind this entire poem, which is why I love to think about the way in which we can marry poem to poem in Leaves of Grass. It's quite a remarkable accomplishment. At 3A, I just want to take us back to Brooklyn Ferry to just show the way in which Whitman is able to play this game again and again and again, and in remarkably creative ways. I mean, I'm stunned at the way he can pull it off. Do you remember this? Do you remember the set of lines in Crossing Brooklyn Ferry 7? Closer yet, I approach you. I mean, there's going to be 7 now uses of this you in this simple little passage of passage 7. What thought you have of me now? I had as much of you. I laid in my stores in advance. I considered long and seriously of you before you were born. Who was to know what should come home to me? Who knows? But I am enjoying this. Who knows? For all the distance, but I am as good as looking at you now. For all you cannot see me. I mean, there's a reason we call these conversations Talks with Walt, and I think that this poem is so remarkable because it begins with the word solemn, and yet it ends with this unbelievably joy-filled observation. You can't touch the soul. It's transcendent, and because of that, the soul will transcend this horrific war. It is an amazing accomplishment, in my estimation, that he could give this level of optimism and hope. Sometimes those on the outside of America ask, how can Americans be so optimistic? I think one of the answers is Walt Whitman, and more particularly Leaves of Grass, and a poem like this. Why? Because he reminds us that no matter what it is that bullets and bayonets can do to the human body, there is nothing it can do to the soul. And of course, not just the individual soul, but the American soul. With that in mind at 3B, I think this is a fine question for you to grapple with. Do you think Whitman is right? This is obviously the heart of his theodicy. This is the answer to the question, how can we have so much horror that happens? And his answer is, no. It's an important fire that we must go through. The fitful flame is, of course, the earlier usage. But on the other side of that stands the soul, and it has been somehow... it's been purified through that fire, and that's the wonder of all wonders. But, I mean, do you think it's true that bullets can't kill souls? And to what degree is Whitman's Leaves of Grass challenging you to think differently, ontologically and epistemologically? Thank you.